we'd work real hard, and even back in those days, you could get money on drink bottles, and I'd walk around the streets getting money for collecting drink bottles and cashing them in to get money to help with my racing, and mowing people's lawns, working at telephone exchanges at night, carting hay in out of paddocks at night to get money, like the things that you had to do. It was 7 days a week and a lot of hours a day. There's lots of days in my life where you'd have 3 or 4 hours sleep and be out at the next job getting money just so as you could go motor racing. You just had to do it,
Go, go, go! And you're doing it, he's in! That's a massive crash, and it's happened immediately! This is amazing! Big shot, and it's lights out, and away we go!
I'd built a brand new car and they accepted my entry.
Yeah, right.
But the first 3 years that I entered Bathurst, they knocked my entry back because they said that they didn't believe I had enough money to race there.
Yeah, right. So there's there's pretty much as much politics as there are now than there was then. Is that what you're kind of saying?
There was plenty of politics then too. Don't worry about that. Plenty of it.
Can you exaggerate on those times back then though? Because you're obviously working hard to get a car on the grid, and you are known for your privateer days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened back then?
Oh well, we'd work real hard, and even back in those days, you could get money on drink bottles, and I'd walk around the streets getting money for collecting drink bottles and cashing them in to get money to help with my racing, and mowing people's lawns, working at telephone exchanges at night, carting hay in out of paddocks at night to get money, like the things that you had to do. It was 7 days a week and a lot of hours a day. There's lots of days in my life where you'd have 3 or 4 hours sleep and be out at the next job getting money just so as you could go motor racing. You just had to do it,
Yeah.
Otherwise you weren't racing.
Yeah.
And then you'd enter an event and then you get your entry knocked back. It was pretty disappointing. But in hindsight, probably they were right. I really didn't have the money, but I would have got there and I would have made it happen, because my entire life has been about making things happen, and it hasn't stopped. So,
well, you made Marulan happen, and Wakefield Park to a degree too. You looked after that place for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I was there for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts? Obviously, we were talking about this at the track a while ago, and when I said, "Oh, boys, come on my podcast," and I was saying this, like, what's your thoughts on the whole Wakefield situation now? Like, Garry, you were full into helping that track progress from 94 onwards, really. Was it 94 or was it early 2000?
No, well, when it started, early 2000 was when I got involved and went there and managed it. And then we changed it all. We changed the track, changed the layout, and made it more user-friendly so that you could actually drive powerful cars around it better. And it was still, we didn't make it a power track so the little cars wouldn't work. We had it so that if you had a little Ford Escort or you had a big sports sedan, they'd both still work. And I believe to this day, Wakefield track is still like that. You can run a big powerful car or a little underpowered car and still be competitive with each other there. But I mean, I loved the place and still do. And hopefully very soon it'll be all up and running again.
Yeah, yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah.
Braydan, for you though, as your dad was saying about Wakefield Park, you said with the go-kart and stuff like that. Do you have any memories about the track while it's shut?
Yeah, a lot of the memories I actually have of it are pretty recent, because my first actual day of driving around Wakefield would have been, 2017 or 18, I think it was, yeah. Yeah. So my first race at Wakefield was 2019.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, in a legend car. And, I haven't done a lot of driving around there, but I've been there a lot, and I spent quite a few years just running around everywhere and doing everything.
Yeah, you boys are helping on. Is it your girlfriend's Hyundai XL? Is that where you both? Hang on, do you have two XLs? The one.
She's got her XL in Adelaide, and then I've been slowly building mine over here for the last 5 or 6 years. I've been slowly putting one together.
Yeah,
I got it nearly ready to go, but then they changed to the control suspension. Then I just sort of haven't had the money to put that in it yet. So it's just sort of sat on the back foot a little bit. We've run it at Marulan in their XL series that they do over there. It's a good little car.
Yeah. Talking about Marulan,
Yeah.
I went there one time with Timmy Beale ages ago, buzzing around the track when you boys were on the track. That was that your backyard? I don't actually know the whole story. Can you actually explain a bit about the whole Marulan thing to get it out there when you
Pretty
guys
much,
owned it?
yeah.
And
Yeah, well, what happened was because Tony Parrish kept saying he was closing Oran Park down, and that was it. And I knew, because I knew what Tony was like, I knew he'd never build another track. So I thought somebody's got to replace Oran Park, or it's not going to happen. So that's why in 1992 we bought that property in Marulan and started building the track. And just slowly kept building it and building it and building it. You know, I'd been on the phone to Bruce Keys from Cams and talking to him the whole way through it, making sure that I'd be able to get it passed as a racetrack when I had it finished. And then, it was in our... Then when I went down to run Wakefield, we moved down and built a brand new house down there then in 2000 and then drove each day to Wakefield and back. But I was still just behind the scenes building that track slowly in the background so that when Oran Park shut, I'd have that sort of ready to open so that there would be another track at least in New South Wales and we wouldn't lose it completely. But, you know, it was my long-term plan from a long way back was to build another racetrack in New South Wales. So...
Yeah, Brooke had some interesting points actually when before you guys were coming to the studio. Brooke, what were you saying about obviously his car racing career and stuff like that you found interesting?
Well, I think we'll just talk because we're on Wakefield at the moment. You mentioned, we saw online in one of your interviews and that there was things about, because as you said, you took over Wakefield for over up to a decade.
Yeah.
And there were things not just on the track you wanted to improve, but off the track, which we found interesting. And it was things that you'd said that you wanted, like, for everyone to be able to actually enjoy the event, which was, you know, the clean toilets, places for the families, etc., and to run. And you did quite a great job of that over at Wakefield. Well, how do you find now with the tracks that we're kind of now what we're saying left with, if we hopefully Wakefield stays there, but do you see that what you worked hard for there is at SMP now and other tracks, or is that something do you feel like they need to really be working on?
They could still work on it. I mean, our main aim at Wakefield, and like my wife was there as well, and she, you know, used to put flowers in the toilets and do all that sort of stuff. And we used to make sure the toilets were clean because, unfortunately, Oran Park's toilets and Calder's toilets and every track we went to around the country, the toilets were a disgrace. So we wanted to have them good, and that's especially when we built Marulan. You know, we tiled the floors in the toilets and we tried to make it as user-friendly as we could. And the other big thing at Wakefield and at Marulan, I mean, they don't have food at Marulan anymore, but we spent a lot of money on the cafe and stuff to make sure that it would be open every day, that you get good food and good drinks at a reasonable price, because we always reckoned that, you know, after years and years of travelling around the country at all these different tracks, it'd be crap food and you'd be paying a fortune for it, or there'd be no food, and all these different things. And like for years, you'd go in at the gate, there'd always be a drama going to a race meeting at the gate, trying to get in, ticketing would be a problem, and you'd be having fights. And this was from the 70s right through. Yeah. There'd always be a drama at the gate. You wouldn't have enough tickets for your people or whatever. So we always, especially at Wakefield, I really concentrated. My main aim was to make sure that when the competitors turned up in the morning, they'd be comfortable, they'd be able to get in the gate without argument.
Yep.
And that, you know, you'd be able to go through scrutineering without people jumping up and down and fighting. You'd still have everything could be safe, everything could be legal, but you wouldn't have that arrogance. We'd try to get rid of the arrogance out of motor racing and make it a friendly family type business thing rather than people yelling and screaming and saying you've got to do this and you've got to do that, because that used to really annoy me. And, I mean, the first Konica V8 supercar thing we did at
Wakefield.
At Wakefield, I was really proud of the fact that I got a 3-page letter from Gary Rogers a couple of days after the event and said, this is the best race meeting I've ever been to. Everyone's friendly. everything was easy from coming through the front gate, and I just thought he's experienced what I've experienced over all those years of just going through torture to get to your bloody before you even sat in the car. And that was their main aim, was to make that easy. So it was very good getting that letter from
Garry
Rogers, which I've still got at home, you know, that raved on for 3 pages about how happy he was with going and running at that event because we made it easy for him.
I think you're 100% achieved, and it's still carried through. Like the times I've been there the last 2 years with Dan, like I said to Dan, you notice the clean toilets. That's the first thing. I think. And the food. I come from I've got a lot of illnesses and that, so I've got to be careful what I eat. And I said to Dan, I go to SMP and I've got to bring all my own food or I'm going to starve. But I went to Wakefield and they're like, no, what do you need? We can make it all, prepare it all, and it's all great food. Everything, just getting in and out of the track, like you said. There's no argument. We're in and out. Dan's calm. We've been a few times to S&P. Dan is not calm because the drivers are struggling to get through and they're the ones racing. So, and as you know as well, and you're like, what? I think it's a huge difference, the experience we've felt at Wakefield compared to some other tracks. And I think, hopefully we don't see it go because you've made a big difference there. That's really shown.
Garry, so you were saying you got a letter from Garry Rogers. You used to race him back in the day, didn't you?
I raced against Garry heaps. Heaps of races in sports sedans and in the touring cars when he was racing forever, like I have been. Can
you explain your rivals on the track? Like, obviously, I'm going to ask Braydan eventually his rivals, but we'll go with yours first. Did you actually have any rivalries back then with Rogers, Dick Johnson, anyone that came to mind that you had a good, like, biff and barge that you're still mates with now? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, well, me and Alan Moffat had quite a few dealings, but I mean, but then on the other end, Alan Moffat helped me a lot too. Over the years, at the Falcon years, he helped me a lot. But in the Mazda years, he didn't, because I mean, I hated the Mazdas with a massive passion because I reckon they shouldn't have even been there racing against our V8 touring cars because they were a sports car, not a touring car, in my opinion. But we had a few run-ins on the track with Alan Moffat, but most of the rest of the time was all pretty good. We were all sort of, back in the day, we're all pretty good mates. Like, if you broke an axle and, like, Dick Johnson, Alan Moffat, Freddie Gibson helped me a lot in the early days, in the very early days. There's so many people in motorsport that used to help each other out, you know. You'd break something on your car and they'd just give you the parts, you know. They'd say, that's all right, you can have that, and away you go. And it was good. But no, there was no real rivals that, you know, that we sort of hated, that you couldn't get along with. It was a very exciting, very good days back in the old days because, like I said, you needed something, you'd go and ask, and it was the same with us. You know, we always had parts and things, even though we didn't have much money. We'd scrounge things and have parts. So
do you feel that's the same now, like that people help each other? We've seen that in some of the categories, but do you feel like what you're racing in and what you've seen people like from V8s and that, where you've come from, there's the same level of helping out, like as you've mentioned?
Not like it used to be. It's different. I mean, we needed a little part for the TCR car at Eastern Creek, and we ran around and I think Melbourne Performance Centre ended up having the part that we wanted. And they gave us the part we needed for that. It was only a little part, but it was still, it helped us big time. So they did help us. They didn't say, no, we don't have it. You know, they actually went and looked for the part, and they didn't need to, but they did. They actually helped us out, and it's been pretty good like that throughout the classes. But in the old days, you know, the people would come and help you, and they still do at Speedway. You know, if you have a problem with your car, you crash in between heats, there's people, other drivers that will even come and help you put your car back together.
Can you explain, like, obviously you guys come here preparing for your Speedway season. Braydan, are you running the speed car or the midget? And the sprint car, or just the one this year? What's the go?
I was thinking that I'd more so just focus on the midget. And I haven't sort of done that for a while now, just focusing on the one car. But I may, over like Christmas, New Year, there's a few races that I might go and do with the sprint car, maybe.
And and you just don't. You guys just prefer to. Is which actually is more harder to prepare, the sprint car or the speed car?
They're both.
Your dad's thinking about it. He's on.
Yeah, they're both pretty similar. They've both got their own sort of maintenance routines that they have. Yeah. Most of it's similar, but there's a few different specifics with each one. Like the midget, we got an overhead cam motor that we have to change the timing belt in every now and again, which we don't have to do with the sprint car. So other than that, it's not too much of a difference. Yeah.
What about growing up around your dad, Braydan? Do you obviously you were saying about early memories, but for you, when was the first time for you? Like you were like, you know what? Like, so my stepdad and I get along, right? And I was like, one time I just literally just watched him. I was racing. I mentioned it on a podcast.
Yep.
I was watching the 97 Bathurst 1000 and then he was a support race.
Yep.
And then my mum said, hey, that's Jeff. That's who I'm dating. And that's how it went from there.
Yep.
For you, do you remember a certain point where you were like, you know what? I want to be a part of this. What was that where you were just like, when you'd realise that your dad was like a Hall of Famer in racing, do you know what I mean? A well-known personality.
Yeah, going to some of the races that he was running at that point in time when he was running the V8 Giants in the AMRS series and the Independent Race series. I'd go and sort of watch that when I was young, but the main sort of thing that really kicked it off for me was going to the Speedway all the years that we did, because we'd always go up and watch at Parramatta or Goulburn or Nowra or wherever and just go and watch races. And then, one night we were there and then I thought, well, hang on, what about junior sedans? And I started Googling it, which he didn't have back in his day.
Yeah.
And then I realised, hang on a minute, I could have been racing these for like 3 years now. Why aren't I doing it? And, then we just, sort of threw everything at it and got a car and went racing.
Yeah. Garry, did you delay it because you were like, holy shit, my bank account?
Yeah. No, he just, I just didn't want to rush into it, but I didn't know they could race at 10 either, or probably we would have been.
Yeah, okay.
But I didn't realise that was happening in Victoria and South Australia and Queensland.
Yeah, right.
So
wait, was it those states but not New South Wales? I'm confused.
Yeah, so nationwide besides New South Wales and the ACT was junior sedans from 10 years old.
Okay.
And here was 14.
Yeah.
But that's all changed now since I went and ran and did everything that I did. So they've dropped the age to like 10 and you can run from 10 here now.
Yeah. Garry, did you give him a paddock basher back in the day?
Plenty.
Can you actually explain that, Braydan? How your dad gets into it?
Yeah. I sort of learnt how to drive a manual car when I was like, I don't know, 3 or something.
Really?
Yeah. I wasn't very good, but I was giving it a go back then. Yeah. And I've been growing up on 100 acres, 150 acres, I've been driving a lot for a lot of that time. So I've been doing a lot of driving. Yeah,
Garry, do you remember the car that Braydan drove that he's talking about?
Well, the main car that he drove a lot of, and it's probably one of the reasons he likes midgets. He had a little Honda Odyssey 250 mini sprint, which is they used to race them up in near back of Penrith there. Where they were a 250 two-stroke that looked like a midget. And I had one of those, and he was driving that because that had all the controls on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And he was driving that from, bloody 2 and 3 year old.
Really?
He would sit on my lap and drive that car like flat out because we had another speedway. That was when we were still at Luddenham, and we had another speedway there. And he'd be driving around that track up there fast at a very, very young age. Yeah, very young.
It was in the blood from the get-go.
Yeah. I've always more tried to talk him out of racing than into it. It's just he's wanted to do it. I mean, the other thing, going back to Wakefield Park again, there used to be a fence around the like the admin building there. And he used to just live in that area, and he'd have his cars, and John Bow would be there, and Brocky would be there, and all the different people at the big events, and he'd be talking to them through the fence, and then they'd come in, and he'd, ended up really good mates with John Bow.
Yeah, right.
we actually delayed a race there for him to do the candles on his birthday at one event there. Because John was there with him with his birthday cake on the front veranda of the building there, and he had to blow his candles out, and then John had to run and go and get in the car and off the race went at one of the pro car events. So, yeah, he's been pretty involved.
Since he was young.
Yeah, very young.
Yeah. Braydan, is Bowie actually one of your idols? Have you have any racing idols apart from your dad?
The biggest one is Brian Clausen.
Yeah, okay.
Other than that, yeah, I'd say John Bowe and Troy Jenkins from Midgets in Australia, even though I race against him quite a bit now. Yeah, that's probably the biggest ones, and Brooke Tatnell as well.
Okay, Clausen, the ex-NASCAR driver / sprint car driver who had the accident?
Yeah.
The one who was trying to do as many racing as possible.
Yeah, doing the 200 races in a year thing.
Yeah. Is that what encouraged you to race, really? Or was just like more of a tipping point later on when you started racing?
It was more of a tipping point later on, and I raced against him at Archerfield and Lismore at the World Midget Championships up there. That was a really cool thing. Got to pit next to him and spend a bit of time with him, and it was very, very eye-opening to sort of just see how he went about everything that he does, and he's been a massive influence into everything that I've pretty much done.
Want to hear more? Each week we will share the hottest clips from our guest interviews on YouTube. But to hear the full episode, make sure to subscribe or follow us on your favourite podcast platform.